It'd supposed to be nothing more than an ordinary birthday. Just another quiet night where maybe I'd cut a cake. Maybe I wouldn't. But I never imagined it would turn into the kind of memory that stings even when years have passed. I wasn't expecting balloons or parties or loud laughter. I'd learned long ago that Lisa, my wife, wasn't the type to throw me surprises. She tolerated my presence more than she celebrated it, but I thought at the very least there would be civility, maybe even a toast. Instead, what I got was the sound of my daughter's laughter, mixing with her mother's as they made a fool out of me in front of strangers. We were in the dining room. Lisa had ordered expensive food from a fusion place I couldn't even pronounce. The kind of food she knew I wouldn't eat, but she claimed was stylish. She poured wine for her friends, but when she passed by me, my glass stayed empty. I sat in the corner chair, not really part of the gathering, more like a shadow-filling space. Madison, my daughter, had her phone out, laughing with her friends about something on the screen. Then one of them pointed at me and asked, "Is that your dad?" She looked at me and smirked, then turned back to them and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Yeah, that's him. He fixes toilets for a living. Thinks that makes him a man." They laughed. She laughed. My own little girl, the one I once carried on my shoulders, the one I bandaged when she scraped her knees, was now mocking me like I was nothing but dirt. And then she said it. The words that didn't just bruise but shattered me from the inside out. "You're a nobody." My chest tightened. My ears rang. I wanted to remind her of all those nights I sat with her when she was sick. All the times I skipped meals so she could have more. But before I could even breathe, Lisa chimed in, raising her glass with that cruel smile she wore whenever she wanted to hurt me most. She said, "Well, it's time you knew the truth." Then she pointed across the table to Derek, a man in a designer suit I hadn't even noticed before. She said, "This is Derek. He owns 3 restaurants. He's more of a man than you'll ever be. You were always just temporary." The laughter that followed wasn't just sound. It was knives, each chuckle cutting deeper. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the glass. I didn't even defend myself. I just stood up, walked quietly upstairs, packed one bag, zipped it shut, and walked past them without a word. The laughter followed me like ghosts. But when the front door closed behind me, for the first time in years, there was silence. I sat in my truck at the edge of a park, engine off, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed violently, 29 missed calls lighting up the screen. 1 from Madison, 2 from Lisa, 26 from numbers I didn't recognize, and the last from Derek. I didn't answer. I just stared at it, and slowly a smile crept across my face, because in that moment, I had already decided they were going to regret every single word, every laugh. Not tonight, not tomorrow, but soon. And when it happened, it wouldn't be with shouting or fists, it would be with precision. I didn't go back home that night, didn't call anyone, didn't even bother to explain myself, because explanations are for people who still believe someone is listening, and I knew in that house nobody was. I parked outside a 24-hour laundromat and slept in the back seat. Cold air seeping through the cracked windows. The kind of cold that stiffens your bones but also sharpens your mind. When dawn came, I drove to a diner I used to visit years ago, a place that still gave free refills and never hurried you out the door. I slid into a corner booth, ordered coffee, black, no sugar, no cream, just the bitterness I needed. And I sat there staring at the steam rising from the cup while my thoughts hardened into stone. People think revenge is about rage, about losing control, but that's not true. Real revenge is quiet, calculated, patient. I wasn't going to storm into the house and scream. I wasn't going to beg my daughter to see me differently. I wasn't going to fight Derek in some parking lot. I was going to dismantle their world piece by piece until they had nothing left but the silence I had already embraced. The first step was clarity. I opened my laptop, connected to the diner's weak Wi-Fi, and started researching lawyers, investigators, financial advisors, anyone who specialized in exposure. Divorce lawyers for the paperwork, tax auditors for the finances, reputation specialists for the public angle, and private investigators for the secrets people think they hide. That's when I found Yusef, an ex-cop turned private investigator, who described his specialty as clean burnouts. He didn't deal in messy confrontations. He dealt in evidence, leverage, deniability. Exactly what I needed. 3 days after hiring him, he slid a folder across my diner table, thick with photographs and receipts. Derek wasn't the successful businessman Lisa believed. He was drowning in debt, juggling credit cards, committing tax fraud, and to top it off, he wasn't even loyal to her. The photos showed him with hostesses, interns, waitresses, a trail of infidelity long enough to strangle him. I paid Youssef extra for background checks, and what came back was gold. One restaurant built illegally on rezoned property, unpaid business taxes, loans he was about to default on. The man looked rich, but he was living on borrowed time and borrowed money. Perfect. I didn't confront them. I didn't wave the evidence in Lisa's face. Instead, I began planting seeds. Anonymous tips to the IRS, discreet envelopes to local reporters, quiet copies of documents sent to lawyers who specialized in financial fraud. I copied Lisa's name into some of those tips, subtly linking her as Derek's domestic partner and beneficiary. The goal wasn't just to bring Derek down, it was to drag her with him. Meanwhile, Madison unknowingly helped me. She posted videos on social media flaunting shopping trips, Derek throwing money around, luxury bags stacked high. She thought she was rubbing salt in my wounds, but all she was doing was documenting financial fraud in real time. I forwarded every link to my lawyer, and then came the credit cards. Every card Derek was using was still tied to my accounts I had frozen quietly. I let them reactivate long enough for Lisa and Derek to get comfortable, then shut them off again one evening while they dined at a steakhouse. The $700 bill sat unpaid as they argued with the manager. Derek red-faced, Lisa screeching. A waiter snapped a photo and posted it online, the caption mocking them as a couple throwing a tantrum when their cards were declined. The internet did the rest, laughing at them the way they had laughed at me. This was just the beginning. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to return their calls. All I needed was patience, and patience was something I had in endless supply. Days turned into weeks, and the silence between us stretched into something sharp and unbreakable. But I was no longer the one bleeding from it, they were. Every move I made was invisible to them, yet every result cut through their carefully painted image like shattered glass. Lisa posted photos online. Life was perfect. Dinners in candlelight, shopping bags lined against the couch, captions about how she finally found real happiness. But behind that thin veil, the storm was already breaking. The IRS opened an investigation into Derek's restaurants, seizing financial records, freezing accounts, dragging his name into headlines that no PR manager could spin clean. Reporters circled like vultures, publishing stories about wage theft, unpaid suppliers, and how his supposed empire was nothing more than a collapsing house of cards. Lisa, tied to his name on several contracts, was summoned as well, dragged into depositions she never imagined would touch her. She called me in panic one night, her voice shaking through the phone, asking if I knew anything about the investigators. I listened quietly, let her words tremble in my ear, and then I hung up without saying a word. That silence spoke louder than anything I could have said. Madison, meanwhile, was still playing the role of princess on social media, unaware that her posts were being bookmarked and screenshotted by every journalist hunting for proof of extravagance paid through fraud. She flaunted designer clothes, foreign trips, luxury dinners, but the comments began to shift. Strangers pointed out the timing of her posts matching Derek's scandals, asking where the money came from, calling her entitled, spoiled, complicit. She tried deleting the posts, but the internet never forgets. Every image was archived, every caption dissected. Slowly, her followers turned into critics, her friends into ghosts. Derek, cornered and desperate, tried calling me too, his number flashing across my screen late at night, but I never picked up. I wanted him to taste the helplessness I had swallowed that night at the dinner table, when he smirked in his designer suit, while my wife announced to the world I was nothing. Now he was the one with nothing. His restaurants bleeding money, investors abandoning him, lawyers circling with lawsuits, and Lisa, who once raised her glass in mockery, was now pawning her jewelry to pay retainers. Yet none of them thought it was me pulling the strings. They believed it was bad luck, timing, fate. That was the sweetest part of all. Revenge without fingerprints. But I wasn't done. I wanted the final blow to be public, undeniable. the kind of humiliation that would echo longer than laughter. So I planned carefully. Derek had one restaurant still clinging to life. The flagship he believed was untouchable. I tipped off inspectors with evidence of health code violations. Youssef had documented rats in storage rooms, expired meat, fake invoices, the night of a major city event when the restaurant was full of politicians and celebrities. Inspectors raided, shutting it down in front of flashing cameras. Photos hit the front page by morning, Derek in handcuffs, arguing with officials while Lisa stood behind him pale and broken. Madison, for the first time, went silent online. No posts, no laughter, just silence. And that silence was my victory anthem. When the dust finally began to settle, it wasn't calm, it was ruin. A ruin they had built with their own arrogance and cruelty. And I was only the wind that carried it faster toward collapse. Derek was indicted on multiple charges: fraud, tax evasion, labor violations, and though his lawyers tried to drag the cases out, the evidence stacked higher than his lies. Investors pulled out, landlords reclaimed properties, and one by one, the restaurants that once fed his ego shut, their doors with foreclosure signs. Lisa, who once basked in his money and mocked my hands for being rough, was left scrambling, her accounts frozen, her name tied to debts she hadn't even read before signing. She tried selling the house, but the bank seized it first, leaving her with nothing but bitterness. She called again, this time not in anger, not in confidence, but in desperation, her voice a cracked whisper begging me to help, to forgive, to remember the years we once shared. I let the phone ring out because forgiveness is for those who show remorse, not for those who raise a glass to your humiliation. Madison's world crumbled slower but no less painfully. Her friends disappeared, invitations dried up. Brands she thought would sponsor her blocked her instead, and her once adored posts became magnets for ridicule. She was no longer the laughing daughter pointing at her father. She was the girl people whispered about, the spoiled child of a scandal, the one who lost everything in the shadow of her mother's greed and her stepfather's fraud. I never gloated, never sent a message, never rubbed their faces in it, because true power lies in silence, and silence is what I mastered. While their empire collapsed, I rebuilt mine. The diner where I planned everything became my temporary office. But soon I invested in small businesses, not flashy, not loud, just steady. A mechanics shop run by a veteran, a bakery owned by a widow, a landscaping company started by two brothers, fresh out of prison trying to live clean. I gave them what Derek never gave his workers: fair pay, dignity, stability. Slowly, my name meant something again. Not to Lisa or Madison or Derek, but to people who mattered, people who knew the weight of respect. Nights I sat alone, I thought about the moment Madison called me a nobody, and I realized something important. She was right. I was a nobody in their world. But their world was hollow, a stage built on lies and nobodies like me, the ones who worked with their hands and endured humiliation quietly. We are the ones who survive when the stage burns down. Lisa vanished from the city eventually. Rumors said she moved states. Others said she stayed and lived quietly in a rented apartment. But I didn't care to know. Derek was sentenced, not long but long enough to erase his arrogance, and when reporters asked about me, I stayed silent. They wanted a quote from the ex-husband, the man who had been mocked, but I never gave them a soundbite. My revenge was complete not because they lost everything, but because I no longer cared whether they existed. That's the final stage. People forget about revenge. It's not the collapse of your enemies, it's the freedom of your own soul. I walked out of the courthouse one morning, the sun hitting my face, and realized I felt lighter, not because they suffered, but because I was finally untethered from them. I wasn't the man mocked at a dinner table anymore. I wasn't the father ridiculed by his daughter. I wasn't the husband dismissed by his wife. I was simply me, and for the first time in decades, that was enough. And maybe one day Madison will understand what she threw away. Maybe she won't. But that weight is hers to carry, not mine. As for Lisa, she can toast to whatever scraps of happiness she finds. But she'll never again raise a glass over my humiliation. My silence was my answer, my patience my weapon, and my survival my ultimate victory.